Hey, good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Jeremy Derryberry. I'm one of the directors here at Everest, along with my wife, Ann. I want to thank you for joining us for our presentation tonight. Our topic is going to be focused on how do you figure out the cost of a college for your student before you apply. And we're going to cover some other stuff, uh, topics on financial aid, how colleges calculate that sort of thing for each student, and some of the other things that you need to consider as you're looking at building a college list for your student going forward. Um, we'll break tonight up into the presentation, and then we'll do a Q&A at the end. If you have a question about a slide, feel free to jump in. I'm running this tonight by myself. Our college counselor, who would normally be with me, Linda Hitchcock, was not feeling well, so I'm going to try to manage this as well as I can on my own. But if you have a burning question, feel free to jump in, or otherwise you can put it in the Q&A or chat, and we'll get to it at the end. Um, just a little housekeeping. We are recording tonight, and tomorrow I'll send you out an email with a link to the video, the presentation, and some supporting materials with resources that you can use to help you as you weed through all the various options that colleges have as far as financial aid, how to figure out the best ways to compare aid and things like that. If I will do my best to answer your questions. Linda has a little bit more experience than I do in all of this, but if there's something I can't answer, we'll obviously get it, track you down and answer and get it to you at a later time. Um, with that being said, I think we have everybody on board. I'll get started. Um, so the first thing that we like to do when we talk about uh, uh, colleges is um, how do you figure out what is the price you're actually going to be paying? Now, what you're going to see when you look at a college's website is the list price. They're going to talk to you about, sort of the sticker price, and that's often a shock for most people. But what you really are concerned about is what is going to be your net price. And that's going to be their list price minus any kind of aid that you might receive from the school or any sort of outside scholarships, grants, things like that. Um, so as you're looking through colleges and you're looking at the list price, don't let that be a determining factor for you. You need to understand what is actually going to be the price that your individual child, is going to pay when they are attending. So how do we get to the net price? That's really what we're looking for to discuss here tonight initially. Um, what you want to find on every college is the net price calculator. They are required by law to have it on their website. Um, and what it is going to do, you're going to plug in your personal information, limited information, because this is really just an estimate for you up front. They're all a little bit different. Having gone through this process a year ago, I can tell you that you might get a very wide range of things that they're going to ask for. And what they're doing is each college has their own sort of metrics that they use to determine student aid, and those uh, things are built into their calculator, hopefully. So it's going to ask you questions about your personal financial information, your students' financial information. It may ask about their students' academic record. It may ask about extracurriculars. It may ask about test scores. It's really what they are prioritizing as far as figuring out how they're going to award aid to you potentially. Um, so what I would recommend you do is if you have a school that you are interested in, the first thing I would do is go to that website and type in either net price calculator or NPC. Um, and it should pull up on their webpage from that search. Um, it's really important to understand that they're not standardized. Each one could be very different. Some schools are very good about keeping their net price calculator up to date. Others are not, and that can be frustrating. Um, uh, the other thing I would say is that you want to consider that what you're getting now is sort of a net price for a student who's attending this year. So if you have a junior this year, it's not going to be updated for next year's numbers. So you're really just getting a ballpark, but it is the most accurate ballpark that you're going to get to help you determine what your student is going to be. My one main piece of advice for you, once you've done the net price for a school, is to capture that information somehow. Take a screenshot, print it out, save a PDF of it. And why do you want to do this? Well, once you've got your choices and your child's been admitted to the schools that they're interested in attending, and you're trying to decide which one you're going to choose, you're going to get a lot of different aid offer letters, and they're going to be a little bit different. And you may find yourself saying, well, this college has this much aid, this one has this much aid. I really want to go to this school, but the other school's offering me more money. Um, if you want to be able to go back to that other school and say, this is the price that these people are offering me, um, and be able to have that information to compare to them. Another place where this is important is if you're doing something like early decision with the school, which is a binding decision, except if you can't pay for it. So if a college has admitted your child early decision and you've done the net price calculator and you thought that you could financially afford it, but they come back with an offer letter that is not meeting what you thought you were going to get based on the net price calculator, you can then show that information to them, and they should hopefully adjust their aid award to make it affordable for you. And if not, that is your ticket out of the early decision process. So it's really important that when you're doing this research, that you capture that information. It's also really important that you just do it to begin with, because it will help you, in your decision process. One of the things we like to talk about here a lot is affordability. It's really important for you as a parent, before your child gets too deep into the college list process, to really spend some time thinking about how much you can, as a family, afford for your child to attend college, and to not spend time allowing them to look at schools that you're not going to be able to afford. I spent a lot of time on parent college boards, um, you know, researching what people have to say, and it's really disheartening to see parents who have allowed their child to, apply to a school, put all the effort into the application, which is a lot of effort for each school, to get into a school that is their quote unquote dream school, and then for the parent to see the sticker price that comes in the financial aid letter and realize that they can't afford it. There's nothing like having to tell your child no after they've done all this work, especially after the work that they've done in high school to get to that point. You don't want to be in that position. So it's really important now, before you do that process, to really sit down and be honest with yourself. How much can we afford for 4 years, maybe 5 years, as an aggregate price, to pay for college, and be upfront with your children about that before they start the process. It's hard to discuss money with your kids sometimes, but being honest up front will go a long way. And I found that kids understand that. Affordability is different for every family. So having that knowledge is empowering for them, because it will help them narrow down their choices. I mean, there's more than 2,500 colleges in the U.S., sort of standard four-year colleges that your kid might apply to. So you're going to have a lot to wade through. If you have a price ceiling that you're working with, that will help cut a lot of them out of the picture right away. Um, so figuring out what that net price is and using the net price calculator for each school is really one of the first steps that we would say after you've decided what your budget is going to be. That's what you need to do. Um, so, sorry. So financial aid is the next thing that we want to cover. As you're going into this process, you're going to run into two types of forms. The most common that everyone is really going to want to fill out is the FAFSA. This is the federal application for free financial student aid. You're going to have to fill it out every year uh, as a as a senior once you've started applying, and then every year once your kid is attending. And this is used by the federal government, the student aid office, to determine what types of federal aid you could get, work study, grants, or loans. It's also going to be used to generate the student aid index, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. Um, but it's also going to be used by schools to determine the other types of aid that they can give you. It may also be used by outside scholarship organizations to determine if you have need. Um, What you're going to get back once you complete the FAFSA is something called a student aid report. It's going to be confusing and it's not going to make a lot of sense, but the schools are going to take that information and plug it into their system in order to decide what type of aid to offer you. Um, you may have heard in the news that the FAFSA went through a change for the 2023-2024 period. It was a mess. It wasn't implemented in a timely fashion, and it caused a lot of problems, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. The good news is they've worked most of those kinks out. So this year it was not as bad, and I would anticipate hopefully next year, if you're, a junior right now or a rising senior, when you're applying for it next year, hopefully you will not experience a lot of the hiccups that I did 2 years ago, as we waited for months and months to get the information and actually just to be able to access the presentation in the first place. The other financial aid form that you may run into is the CSS profile. This is handled by a College Board, who also does the SAT. And it is a much more in-depth form. It's really going to dig into a lot of your financial background. It takes a lot more time to complete. I mean, plan to spend a couple of hours doing it. It is usually only used by, I would say, some of the more exclusive schools. It's about, I think, 250 now, but so if your child's looking at something like an Ivy League school, something like Northeastern, Syracuse, some other places like that, places where you are probably going to want to have financial aid, you may expect to have to fill it out. Um, there's a fee for it for most families. It's $25 and then $16 for subsequent schools. Um, but it's just something that when you're looking at schools and building your college list, I would have a little box on the side that I check to make sure that you know that you're going to have to fill it out. That's something you really want to know ahead of time because it is going to take you a little bit of time and effort compared to the FAFSA. Um, so talking about the FAFSA changes, the FAFSA used to be sort of like the CSS and that it was a very onerous process to try to complete. A few years ago, as it went through the reordering, the change, they did a huge simplification of it. A large part of that is now handled by a direct, instead of you having to enter your financial information, they will pull that information from your tax return that you filed with the IRS. It's an automated process. You click a box, they tap into the IRS system and pull that over, and then it gets integrated into the FAFSA form for you. Um, they also reduced a large number of the things that they sort of plugged into the FAFSA to get to their number, the student aid index number. Um, and they also have done they expanded the Pell Grant eligibility for the people, sort of the income level that would make you eligible to receive a Pell Grant. As I said, the first year that they did it, it caused a tremendous amount of chaos for everyone. They were not getting results back to the school financial aid offices until March or later. That's typically when you would be making your decision about which school to attend. So it made it very difficult for a lot of students to be able to say if they could afford a school or not having that information ahead of time. It also made life very difficult for the financial aid offices and the schools because they were getting data in piecemeal, chunks from FAFSA, from the Federal Student Aid Office, if they were getting any information at all. This past year, they tried to work out a lot of those kinks. Normally, the application would open October 1st. They opened it December 1st to try to mitigate some of that. And it seemed to have gone a little bit more smoothly this year. Despite that delay, it does appear that schools are better prepared to handle that this year. And hopefully by the time that you all are applying next year, they will have reverted it to October 1st. One of the last things that happened during the Biden administration is they passed a law that said that this does have to be available by October 1. Whether or not that actually happens, I can't guarantee for sure, but hopefully for you, things will go more smoothly this year. They seem to have worked out a lot of the kinks that were in place before. Anytime you change a huge federal program and you change a technology program on the back end, to try to update it. That's, can be expected. Unfortunately, the Department of Education was being mandated to have it done by a certain time and had to roll it out, I think, well before it was ready, unfortunately, and then sort of push it back another year because Congress wasn't allowing them to do that. But hopefully, this coming year, you all will not suffer what a lot of people went through the prior 2 years. Um, so student aid index, what is it? I've drawn this information directly from the Federal Student Aid Office so that I can be as specific as possible. A lot of people get their student aid index number back and they think it is a financial number, a hard financial figure. It is not. It is actually an index number. The index can be negative. And it can go up to, what is that, almost a million. Um, so it's not a dollar amount. It is a number that your financial aid offices are going to plug into their systems that gives them an idea of what you should be able to afford um, for your contribution to your child's education. If students have a negative number, that means that they are most likely going to get the maximum amount for their Pell Grant award, which I think this year is $7,500. Um, uh, it's important. You're going to get it back. You're not really going to understand it. Um, and I don't really understand what the number means for me. I just know that, my financial aid office is going to use that to give me their aid offer. Um, what goes into it? Um, for students coming up this year, it's going to look at your family size. It's going to look at your marital status, your state. It'll pull your income for you and your student. Um, there's several things that go into are counted as your assets. One important thing to know is that it's not looking at your retirement funds. So that's not going in there. But your 529 plans are being counted as a parent asset. Anything that you have, there's a liquid asset is going to be counted. Um, one thing that I think is important for parents to know is they try to decide, uh, um, where to allocate money as far as where they have savings and things like that. Student assets are counted at a 20% rate versus parents' assets, which are counted at a 5% rate. So while you may have, a lot of money in your name, if your student has a lot of money in their name, that is actually going to count negatively against them versus the same amount if it was in your bank account. So moving assets to your student is not necessarily a good idea. Maybe they've received gifts from people and they have, money in their bank account or investments or things like that. It is going to look at that information when it's calculating the SAI. So that's important information to know. Um, a lot of changes happened when they did the new FAFSA. Um, some of them are good, some of them were bad. Um, the student aid index used to be called the expected family contribution, and that was very confusing, like I said, because like the SAI, people took it as a financial number, a hard number, when in fact it was, just a range for student aid to be able to understand how much you might be able to contribute. Um, I think the one thing that has really hurt families the most is removing what was called a sibling discount. So if you had one child in college and you had another child getting ready to go into college, they would actually provide you more need or consider that you had more need because you had two children in there at once. That has been removed. So I know a lot of families were actually hit when that change happened because they already had a student in college and then we're trying to get another into college. That discount is not there anymore. Um, the other thing that you need to know is if, like me, you're a small business owner, you are going to have to figure out the value of your business, and that is going to be counted in the index calculation, um, and farms as well. So that's something to keep in mind. Um, let's see if there's anything else. Um, So how do colleges determine need? Um, you're going to hear a term called the cost of attendance. So we talked about the list price earlier. Cost of attendance is going to take that and then add everything else that the college thinks that you might have to pay for your child to attend for a year. So it's tuition and fees, it's room and board, When you do the net price calculator, you're going to see something on the transportation. They're going to make an estimate about how much it's going to cost for your kid to get back and forth to school every year. Loan fees, and other costs like disability dependent care, and some other things. They're then going to incorporate the student aid index, and then they're going to determine your financial need. And what you need to understand is this is a ceiling for how much need-based aid they're going to give you. That's how much the maximum that they might be willing to provide for you. Um, I would say that if you once you've gone through this process and you get your financial aid letter, um, you may disagree with that. And one thing I advocate for parents is, if you have a college that your child is very much interested in attending and you feel like the college is not meeting the need that you think they need to meet, it is okay to call up the financial aid office and advocate and explain why, maybe your situation has changed. One thing to know is that the information going into the FAFSA calculation is going to be the prior year tax return. So if you or your spouse lost your job, or you had a death in the family, or some other major thing has happened, between the two things. I know there's a lot of people in this area who are losing their jobs right now, from the federal government. If something like that has happened, that would make, your income change drastically year to year, or other situations that, might have come up, it is important to call the financial aid office and make that advocation for yourself and your child, because a lot of times they will take that into consideration and adjust the letter. Not always, but it is definitely worth a call. And I would say that throughout any part of this process, if you have questions, if you feel like you're not getting what you need, for a logical reason, not just because you want more money, but because there is a real, foundational reason for you to need that. Do not be afraid to call the financial aid office and self-advocate to see if they can give you more money. Um, and that can be true, all the way up until the time that you make the decision to commit to a school. A lot of times schools, as they are building their classes and they're getting their acceptances, they may reach a point where they don't have enough students that they, need to fill their class. So the closer we get to, that final decision day, the more likely a school is to potentially maybe reconsider how much aid they've given, especially if they feel like your student is an attractive candidate and they really want to get you over the line. It is always possible for them to come back and say, we gave you this much initially, but we maybe more aid became available, or maybe they have decided that they really want your child to attend. So don't be afraid to do that. I wouldn't do it right away. It's helpful, if you have gotten acceptances to several colleges to see what they're offering, and then try to make, an apples to apples comparison, and then be able to go back and say, I've gotten this much. It's going to make this price for me at this school. Can you come close to matching that? That would tip us over the edge to come there. Um, this is also where it's really helpful when you're on your tours and stuff, to really get contacts at the school that you can reach out to later on, to build those relationships, and then be able to have that, point of contact to go in and say later, please help us. A lot of times, schools want you to attend most of the time. That's why they're letting your child in. So I've found that most schools will make an effort, if possible, to get you over the line, if it's, a reasonable difference. Um, so how do colleges meet need? Colleges will meet your needs in four ways. Scholarships, which are generally merit-based, meaning not based on your need, but based on something like your GPA or test scores. Um, it really depends on the school. So some schools do not give any merit aid at all. They just give need-based aid. A lot of the Ivies and a lot of other, sort of, I'd say, more high-end prestigious schools are really, just going to do need-based aid. Um, but a lot of other schools, are going to give you merit aid. And this is, it could be, let's say, for like state schools, large state schools, a lot of them will have something like a matrix that says if you have a certain GPA, you have a certain test score, you have, certain other metrics, they're going to give you X amount of money for merit aid. Other schools will be completely case by case dependent. Typically the smaller the school, the more likely it is that they're going to look at your child individually and make that decision. But if you're applying to somewhere like Georgia, UGA or Texas or somewhere else, they have a matrix out there that oftentimes you can find on their website that will show you, if you have this SAT score and this GPA, this is the amount of aid we're going to give you. And so it really behooves you when you're doing your research to try and suss that out. If you're not finding it on their website, feel free to ping the financial aid office and ask them if something like that exists, because often it does. And that can really help you ahead of time determine if, you know, your child is going to be able to afford the school. Um, Grants are completely need-based. So if your SAI is coming back at, a really low number, you're much more likely to be in the bucket getting the grant. You're also going to see work study and student loans that are offered. Um, that's also usually, the work study especially is going to be going to people with a higher need. Loans are generally available to everybody. Students can take out their individual loan, and then after that, the Parent Plus loan kicks in. And then after that, outside of the college, you'll have private loans also available. Um, so how are you going to pay for all this? There's lots of different buckets that you can pull from, and each person has an individual, case. Um, these are all the the buckets that most people use. Um, it's color coded this way because the higher you go on this stack, the more risk you're taking, and more likely the cost to you is going to rise. Um, as you're sitting here and thinking about which buckets you're going to be pulling from, I really would recommend that you spend some time talking to your child about the major they want to get, and what is the value of that for them long term. Because what we really don't want is your child coming out of college with a lot of debt. And we don't want your child coming out of college with you with a lot of debt. As a parent, you don't want to be paying off tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars, and you don't want your child paying off hundreds of thousands of dollars as they're stepping into a career. That's really going to set them behind and put them in a bad spot. So again, that's, going back to the affordability question and thinking about, um, you know, what is the value that you're getting out of this education, and is it worth the money that you're putting into it? I would say most families use a large combination of the things that are on this screen in order to afford colleges. Um, obviously, the lower down, the less pain you're going to entail. Um, but there are many options out there for you to consider. I mean, a lot of parents will definitely try to cash flow. Um, you know, or then seek loans, or, if you have to, then tapping into something like home equity or your retirement savings. I mean, I would not want to see you in that position doing that, but those are certainly options that you can look at. There are creative ways for you to use things like retirement savings, like Roth IRAs and things like that, to help fund your child's education. But, you really have to balance that with, is the value of what your child is getting that education, is that worth the risk that you're taking, if it's impacting your retirement, and how soon you can retire and whether or not you can retire. These are questions you need to ask yourself now. You don't want to be asking yourself this question, in the summer before their freshman year when the loan pay when their initial payment is due, in August. It's not when you want to be figuring it out. You really want to try to do that now. Um, if you have a financial advisor, that's probably the first place that I would try to sit down and have that conversation. There aren't, in my experience, this is not a topic that a lot of financial advisors are really well versed in, but they can at least, help you sort of analyze what you have available to you, and maybe hopefully help you find the right pathway. There are financial advisors out there that just specialize in college funding and how to do it. Um, and if you look online, you can find those. But in my experience, it's a niche. It's not really widely available. Um, so timelines. As I said, hopefully this year the FAFSA will open up on October 1st. The CSS opens on October 1st. Um, uh, uh, I would encourage you to be ready for that um, come October 1st. Some schools are more likely to give you more aid the earlier you are getting with your application and your FAFSA. That's not true for every school, but that is true, I think, for more selective schools. Um, so having your information ready, being prepared to fill those forms out, knowing if you have to fill the CSS out, having your FSA ID ready to do the FAFSA. Um, that's all important to be, prepared. And this is really something where the parents, I think, have to take the lead. We really encourage kids to take the lead on a lot of things in this process, filling out the applications, doing their essays, that sort of thing. This is really something where you as a parent are going to want to lead the charge for obvious reasons, because, you have access to that information. But it's also something where, you can take the pressure off your child because they are going to be swamped with many other things, trying to get their applications in a timely fashion. This is really one area where you want to be, on top of it. Unfortunately, for the FAFSA, your kid is going to be sort of the point as far as getting communications from the Federal Student Aid Office. So you also want to, I think, be diligent about reminding them to check their email boxes, check their student portals, once they've gotten their acceptance, because you may get a financial aid offer when they get their acceptance. It may also come several months later, just depending on how the school does their applications. So if a school is doing something like a rolling application, or if they've gotten in early admission, a lot of times the true financial aid form will come several months later. So it's important that you sort of stay on top of that during this process, and have them checking regularly, just to make sure that they're not missing anything. It's one thing I found is that students these days are not well versed at staying on top of their email inbox. So that's not a habit that they're in doing regularly. But it doesn't hurt for you to, as a parent, to, prod them occasionally to do that. But really, your point, the thing that you really want to run point on right here is making sure that you're prepared to fill out these forms for them in a timely fashion so that you're not missing any deadlines. Just for instance, Maryland, if you're not, don't have your stuff in by November 1st, you're going to be in trouble. Um, you know, so um, take your responsibility and enjoy that you're not having to write their essays and things like that. This is one area where you can really help them um, get through this process in a timely fashion. A few words about scholarships. One of the questions we get all the time is, how do I get more scholarships? Um, and I think a lot of parents are looking for an easy answer to track them down. In my experience, it's not easy. This is another area where you can really help your student out by doing the legwork. Um, there are thousands and thousands of scholarships out there, not just at the school itself, but in your community, maybe at your employer, maybe at your church, maybe another organization that you're involved in. If your child has a major in mind that they're committed to, going out and looking at, Society of Engineers, something related to what their major is going to be, you'll find a whole wealth of scholarships available out there. You don't have to wait till they're seniors. You can actually start applying to these things now. Um, you can start applying to them early in high school. It just depends on the scholarship type um, and the organization offering it. Um, I always recommend that students look for alignment. An organization offering a scholarship is going to want to see that your student is aligned with what their mission is, or what the mission of the purpose of the scholarship is. So doing that research and finding those things that align with your child, maybe it's their major, maybe it's something they like to do, maybe it's, something they're passionate about, maybe it's something they're affiliated with. Um, these are all things that will help you find scholarships, but it does take legwork. There are several search engines out there that specialize in this, and we'll have that included in the resources that I send you later tomorrow. But those don't cover everything, and a lot of the things that are in those search engines are, I would say, broader, wider ranging scholarships that just anybody can apply to really find the niche stuff that your child might have a more likely possibility of getting. You are going to have to do some legwork. But if you're spending a half an hour and your child gets a scholarship for $2,000, that's to me well worth the money spent. Um, and the time spent doing that effort, because that will really reduce potentially the cost that they have later on down the line. Um, Another thing that I would highly recommend that you take into consideration is that some schools do not allow what's called stacking. And what this is they will offer you financial aid, but if they find out that you have gotten outside scholarships from somewhere else, they will deduct that from their aid offer to you. They do not want you getting more aid than than what the price of the school is, or what they think your need-based aid is. It's not every school, but it is some schools, and so that's another conversation that you want to have when you're on your tour or when you're calling the financial aid office. I have not seen it. It's not generally listed on their websites. Sometimes it is, but you may have to do a little digging to understand that. But that's not something you maybe necessarily want to worry about now, but once you're getting into the nitty-gritty of making the decision, next winter or next spring, that is something that you're going to want to ask them if you have received outside scholarships and been successful in that. Um, I would say that to get outside scholarships, it's going to take work on your child's part as well. Many of them require essays on top of all the other essays that your child is going to write for their applications. So you're going to get pushback from your child about that. But oftentimes those essays can be recycled or reused in some capacity. So again, it's putting in a little bit of work can have a big payoff later. It's also helpful if you can find more than one. So the more that you can apply to, the more likely you are to probably get aid from the sources. Um, I hear a lot of times, if people are more well-to-do, they say there's no reason for me to apply for the FAFSA. That is not true. You absolutely want to apply for the FAFSA no matter what your financial condition is. And that is, as I said earlier, because that FAFSA data is going to be used by the school. It might be used by the outside scholarship organization. It's going to be used by everyone as sort of the baseline to start their determination about whether or not you need aid, um, and how much to give you. So it is very important that you fill it out. Um, One thing you can probably do now is you and your child can go ahead and get an FSA ID at the Federal Student Aid. It's on their website. You click it in. It's basically just setting up your account with them. That's something you can go ahead and do now, and it will also sort of spur you and your child to investigate the website a little bit more and learn more about the Federal Student Aid process. Um, Once you have gotten your acceptances, your child's gotten their acceptances, and you've received your financial aid offer letters from schools, it's really important that you sit down and compare them to try to do it in sort of an apples to apples comparison. They're all going to have maybe some slightly different terms. They're going to sometimes they'll include potential loans that you might have to take out in their calculations and things like that. So don't look at the bottom line. It's really important that there's lots of tools out there on the web that you can plug this information into, and will really give you um, a better apples to apples comparison about, is this really the better offer compared to other schools? And like I've preached all along, you really want to reach out if you have questions. Those financial aid offices are there to help you. They're your friend in this process, as far as answering questions that you may not have the answers to. Um, and each school is really different, how they approach financial aid, what's important to them, what they're willing to give, how much they're willing to budge. So, a little like scholarships, a little bit of effort can go a long way as far as as far as helping you get to that number that makes a school affordable. It's worth your time and effort if you feel like you could get more aid from them to put in that call. And they can also ask you, answer all your questions about, deadlines and other things. Um, and I, wanted to end tonight with a discussion about something that's really come up in just the past month. Um, with the new administration, there's been a lot of discussion about making major changes to the financial aid process and what is available as far as financial aid going forward. Um, right now, there's no actual legislation being considered by any committees in Congress. But in the past year or so, a lot of drafts have come out as far as what they are looking at and the changes they're potentially talking about making. From our perspective, this could radically change how colleges offer aid, what aid is available, and how universities are structured going forward. Most schools at the undergraduate level are just breaking even. So for a university, usually they're making their money off the grad school or other parts of the school. Their undergrad isn't paying all the bills. So any change in the amount of money that schools are getting through this process could radically change um, how many kids can attend school, how much aid they're willing to offer, and how much aid is available to you through the federal programs, and whether or not you have to go to outside sources. One of the things I did not mention is that there are private loans available outside of the federal sources. Those generally come with higher interest rates and more risks. A lot of the federal stuff, there's the possibility of it being forgiven or, other stuff like that that makes it more attractive. Once you get into the private market, it's like any sort of, bank loan that you might take out. There's, it's much stricter stipulations as to having to pay it off down the line. Um, so some of the things that are being discussed right now are limiting the federal direct student loans, um, sunsetting the possibility of having Parent Plus loans, which is what a lot of families use to sort of fill that gap between, grants and things like that and what the actual cost is for them. Ending the subsidized loan program. And what that does is it basically covers the interest cost for your child's loan while they're in school. What you may not know is once they sign that acceptance and take the money and it gets dispersed to the school, you are accruing interest on it right away. So for a subsidized, you'll hear subsidized or unsubsidized. For the subsidized loan, that would be something they are looking to take away. Another thing is that right now you can deduct up to a certain amount of your student loan interest each year off the taxes. That is something they're looking to take away. One thing that's very concerning if you have a child that's looking at maybe a STEM career or is, looking at a career that requires grad school. Right now, there's no limit on the amount of money that they can take out through the Grad Plus loan program. They're now looking at capping it at I think, $100,000 for a lifetime. So if your child is looking at going to medical school or something else that has a very high price grad school pathway in front of them, um, that may that might limit their ability to do that or the schools that they can choose to go to going forward. And there's several other sort of ancillary programs like forgiveness programs and things like that that they're looking at removing or taking away. As I said, none of that has actually been put into legislation, but SIA, having looked at some of the drafts that have been passed around in prior years and looking at some of the statements that have been made in the past few months, it's something that we're obviously watching closely. And as a parent of a child in college, I can certainly I can certainly feel the tension that this is causing, not just, people I know, but in schools themselves. The other big thing that has happened in the past month or so is there has been an order to cap the amount of money that the NIH grants that a lot of research universities use to fund their labs. There's something called indirect cost, which is sort of the money that gets allocated to pay for the buildings and the electricity and the equipment and things like that. Um, it's usually done on a case by case basis, but they are now looking at putting a hard cap on that. And that would have a very detrimental effect on research universities in this country. And it's already actually starting to sort of trickle through what colleges or universities are thinking about as far as how they move forward. For instance, I'll just throw out there, Vanderbilt has announced that they are pausing graduate school admissions right now until they can figure out what's going on. And if you do a quick search for a lot of, maybe your favorite college, you may find that they have already made decisions as far as, having to take a step back and either end programs that they have right now or look at potentially shutting stuff down in the future. So if your child is looking at a STEM career and wanting to go into research, you need to take a hard look and see how this might affect those choices going forward. There's just a lot of uncertainty right now as to what's going to happen and how it's going to affect colleges directly. But as I mentioned earlier, schools, rely on this money in order to provide, top tier research programs for their undergrads and graduate students. If that money dries up, they're going to have to make some tough choices about what programs they continue. You don't want to be, attending a program and have it yanked out from under you when you're, 2 or 3 years into it. Um, so that's just something to keep in mind. Um, it's hard to say how it's going to shake out right now, but it is something that I think as a parent, before you are starting to invest, hundreds of thousands of dollars into this process, potentially over the next few years, you don't want your child in that position. It's not a good place to be. Um, hopefully we'll see some pushback. I know a lot of the universities are pushing back now. How successful they are is to be determined. But just something to keep an eye on as you're thinking about all these things. So that's what I have for tonight. I'll open it up to any questions that you have right now. Feel free to pop on or shoot them in pull up the Q&A. Oh, and actually, I had one other question that I got ahead of time, and that was that we didn't cover in the presentation. And someone asked, how does divorce affect financial aid? Um, in Maryland, as far as I know, there is no stipulation um, that the parents have to pay for their children's college education. So you just need to understand that up front. And therefore, there's no stipulation that either parent has to cover the cost of college. As far as the FAFSA and the CSS are concerned, they will generally well, not generally, they will ask that the parent who provides the most financial assistance to the child now is the one that fills out the form and is the responsible party. So even if a child lives with one parent, if the other parent is providing more of the financial aid to the child now, as far as taking care of living expenses and things like that, that is the parent that is going to be the responsible party as far as the college and FAFSA are concerned. Um, uh, mm, what a lot of parents do when going through a divorce is to include some sort of agreement in the divorce agreement as far as nailing down what responsibilities will be in the future between the parents. Not everybody does that, but that is an option if that's something that you're going through. Obviously, if you've already been through a divorce and that's not in your agreement, it's not something that you can necessarily go back and do retroactively. But that is something to keep in mind if you are in that situation, because it can be difficult. Obviously, if you can't enforce it, to get one parent to agree after the fact as to how you're going to handle that situation, and it can cause problems. So something to keep in mind. What sort of merit aid does UMD offer? I do not have that specific information. I can track that down for you. I do think that they have a matrix available, so let me see if I can find that for you. Are there any other questions? Okay. Well, I want to thank you for joining us tonight. I'm sorry Linda wasn't able to join us, but I do appreciate you showing up. As I said, please let me know if you have any questions after the fact. Um, I do want to just mention that we do have our college application workshops available this summer again, and that registration is open. We have an early bird special through March 31st. Save $100 on it. Your child will come in and spend a week with Linda. She'll help them get through every part of the application, and then I'll sit down and help them with their essays. It's a really great program, and it's a week-long course. They'll be in for 3 hours a day. But it's really, having sent my own child through it, I can assure you that it really helps take, the weight off of you as far as making sure that all the applications are done correctly. They have a good college list that they're applying to, and that, you come out of it ready to apply to the schools that they want to apply to at the start of senior year. So if you're interested in that, feel free to hit me up afterwards, or you can go on our website and register, find out more information. Thank you again for joining us.